Staff Sergeant Lucian Adams, U.S. Army, 30th Infantry, 3rd Infantry Division, Port Arthur, Texas. October 28, 1944, near Saint-Dié, France. The Mortange forest was thick with fog and gunfire that morning. The trees shuddered under the weight of exploding rifle grenades, their branches splintering and raining down in sharp wooden shards. For the men of the 30th Infantry, 3rd Infantry Division, the advance had stalled. The mission was clear: reopen the supply line to the isolated 3rd Battalion, but the cost had already been steep. 3 men lay dead, 6 more wounded, and the company had advanced less than 10 yards. Amid the chaos and confusion, one man refused to yield. Staff Sergeant Lucian Adams, a Texan with a borrowed Browning automatic rifle, looked out across the killing field ahead. German machine guns barked from hidden nests, stitching the trees with bullets. The air was a storm of metal, but Adams set his jaw, gripped the weapon at his hip, and charged. He sprinted from tree to tree, firing bursts from the BAR as he ran, weaving through the deadly crossfire that pinned everyone else down. Rifle grenades burst above him, showering him with splinters and dirt, but he didn't stop. Within 10 yards of the nearest machine gun, he pulled the pin from a grenade and hurled it. The explosion silenced the gunner. Before the smoke had cleared, another German soldier began throwing grenades from just 10 yards away. Adams swung his BAR up and answered with a single burst. 1 man down. He pressed on, charging straight into the heart of the enemy fire. At 15 yards, another machine gun opened up, the rounds tearing the air. Adams met it head-on, killing the gunner with a hand grenade and forcing 2 nearby infantrymen to surrender. But the fight wasn't over. The remaining Germans poured their fire into the forest in a frantic attempt to stop him. Undeterred, Adams moved methodically through the trees, finding and eliminating 5 more enemy soldiers. When a 3rd machine gun opened fire from 20 yards away, he turned, raised the BAR, and cut it down with precise bursts. In a matter of minutes, the forest fell silent. 9 enemy soldiers were dead, 3 machine guns destroyed, and a heavily armed German force had been wiped out by 1 man. The path through the Mortagne forest was clear, and the supply line to the assault companies reopened. When his company advanced, they found Adams standing amid the wreckage, smoke curling through the trees behind him. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with grime and determination, but the line was open again. Staff Sergeant Lucian Adams's fearless assault that day in France was more than an act of bravery. It was the very definition of duty beyond measure. Against overwhelming odds, he stood alone in the storm and turned the tide of battle. Private First Class Harold Christ Agerholm, U.S. Marine Corps Reserve, Racine, Wisconsin. The heat of the Mariana sun beat down on Saipan on July 7, 1944, but the inferno of battle burned far hotter. The Japanese had launched a fierce, determined counterattack, sweeping through positions and overrunning a neighboring artillery battalion. Amidst the chaos, Private First Class Harold Agerholm of the 4th Battalion, 10th Marines, 2nd Marine Division, saw what needed to be done. He did not hesitate. Without waiting for orders, Agerholm seized an abandoned ambulance jeep and drove into the heart of the battlefield. Rifle bullets zipped past him, mortars slammed into the ground around him, yet he moved relentlessly. Time and again, he loaded wounded Marines into the jeep and carried them to safety, returning each time to rescue more. Over the course of 3 grueling hours, he single-handedly evacuated approximately 45 casualties, each trip a gamble with death. Even when the danger escalated, Agerholm's courage did not falter. Spotting 2 men he believed to be wounded, he ran into open fire to aid them, fully aware of the mortal risk. A Japanese sniper's bullet found its mark, ending his life in the midst of his heroic mission. Private First Class Harold Agerholm's actions that day went beyond courage. They were the embodiment of selfless devotion to his fellow Marines. His brilliance, initiative, and utter disregard for his own safety saved dozens of lives and reflected the highest traditions of the U.S. Naval Service. In giving his life for his country, he became a lasting symbol of valor and sacrifice. Technical Sergeant Beaufort Anderson, U.S. Army, 381st Infantry, 96th Infantry Division, Eagle, Wisconsin. Before dawn on April 13, 1945, on the rugged terrain of Okinawa, Technical Sergeant Anderson's unit faced a sudden, ferocious Japanese counterattack on its flank. The night air was pierced by the cries and gunfire of the enemy, and chaos threatened to overwhelm the soldiers. Amid the panic, Anderson acted with decisive courage. He quickly ordered his men to take cover in an old tomb, then, armed only with his carbine, stepped forward to confront the onslaught alone. At point-blank range, he emptied a magazine into the charging attackers, cutting through the first wave of enemies with precision and resolve. Spotting a dud mortar tossed toward him, Anderson seized it and threw it back into the advancing soldiers, where it exploded, killing several in its blast. Refusing to yield, he located a box of mortar shells, meticulously armed them by removing the safety pins and striking their bases against rocks, and then alternated between hurling the shells and firing his carbine into the fanatical force pressing upon him. One by one, the attackers fell or retreated under his relentless assault. Even after sustaining a severe shrapnel wound that left him bleeding profusely, Anderson pressed on. Ignoring his comrades' protests, he made his way to his company commander to report the extraordinary action he had taken. By the end of the engagement, his courage had accounted for 25 enemy killed, the destruction of several machine guns and knee mortars, and the elimination of a serious threat to the company's flank, all achieved single-handedly. Technical Sergeant Anderson's fearless and selfless conduct exemplified valor in the face of overwhelming odds, demonstrating extraordinary gallantry that preserved his comrades and turned the tide of battle on that crucial morning. Private First Class Richard Beatty Anderson, U.S. Marine Corps, Tacoma, Washington. The battle for Rowai Island, part of the Kwajalein Atoll in the Marshall Islands, raged fiercely. On February 1, 1944, the air was thick with smoke and sand as shells burst around the advancing Marines of the 4th Marine Division. Among them was Private First Class Richard B. Anderson, a young man from Washington State, who, like so many others that day, faced the raw, chaotic violence of close-quarters combat. Anderson had taken cover in a shell crater alongside 3 fellow Marines. The enemy was dug in nearby, their fire relentless. Determined to silence them, Anderson pulled the pin from a grenade, preparing to throw. But in the confusion of battle, the grenade slipped from his grasp and tumbled to the bottom of the crater, landing among his comrades. There was no time to think, no chance to run. In that instant of terrible clarity, Anderson made a choice that defined the meaning of sacrifice. With complete disregard for his own safety, he threw himself onto the grenade, his body absorbing the full force of the explosion. The blast shook the crater, sending dirt and smoke into the air. When it cleared, the other 3 Marines were alive, shaken, stunned, but spared. Anderson's selfless act had saved them at the cost of his own life. On that day, Private First Class Richard B. Anderson's courage illuminated the battlefield. His unhesitating sacrifice embodied the purest form of loyalty and devotion to his comrades. In the face of certain death, he chose others over himself, upholding the highest traditions of the United States Marine Corps and the U.S. Naval Service. He gallantly gave his life for his country and for his brothers in arms. Sergeant Sylvester Antolak, U.S. Army, Company B, 15th Infantry, 3rd Infantry Division. The morning of May 24, 1944, near Cisterna di Lituria, Italy broke under the thunder of battle. The offensive to break through the German defenses encircling the Anzio beachhead was in its second brutal day, and progress came at a staggering cost. Amid the hail of enemy fire, one man, Sergeant Sylvester Antolak of St. Clairsville, Ohio, rose to meet the impossible. Ahead of him, an enemy machine gun nest pinned down his squad in the open. The terrain was flat, barren, no cover, no protection. Without hesitation, Antolak surged forward, charging 200 yards across the killing field. Bullets tore through the air in a furious storm, kicking up dust and soil at his feet. 30 yards ahead of his men, he pressed on alone. The first bullet struck him, hurling him to the ground. He staggered up. A second hit followed, then a third, knocking him down once more. Each time he dragged himself to his feet, bloodied but unbroken, his determination outpacing his pain. One shoulder was deeply gashed, his right arm hung shattered and useless. Still, he wedged his submachine gun beneath his good arm and charged straight into the teeth of enemy fire. At just 15 yards from the machine gun nest, He opened fire, cutting down 2 German soldiers and forcing the remaining 10 to surrender. Gasping from blood loss, Antolak called his men forward, reorganized them, and refusing the medical attention he so desperately needed, chose instead to lead the assault on a second strong point 100 yards away. He stormed ahead again, heedless of the bullets slashing through the air. 3/4 of the distance covered, a final burst of enemy fire struck him down. Sergeant Sylvester Antolak was killed instantly. His men, inspired by his courage, charged forward with renewed fury, overrunning the enemy positions and breaking through the German line. By the end of the assault, 20 enemy soldiers were dead, a machine gun captured, and the path cleared for the company's advance, all because one man refused to stop. Sergeant Antolak's supreme sacrifice, unwavering valor, and devotion to the attack embodied the very essence of heroism. In his final moments, he proved that courage can drive a single man to change the course of battle and inspire others to victory. Which of these heroic tales inspired you the most? Drop your thoughts in a comment below. If you enjoyed the stories, please show your support by hitting the like and subscribe buttons.